Thank you, Chairman Hastings. I first like to say that I agree with you that the Magnuson-Stevens Act requires changes and that in its current form it's not working for fishermen. I appreciate today's hearing and would like to stress my belief that this reauthorization requires careful consideration, and I hope that we can work together after today to ensure that our committee puts forth a strong bipartisan reauthorization bill. My questions are of Chairman Robbins. I have two questions. Hope we can get through them. One, the draft legislation we're examining includes flexibility in the rebuilding timeline for stocks, something I've been advocating for years and have introduced legislation to accomplish. It also allows the councils to use alternative rebuilding strategies. From your perspective, will these types of flexibility allow the Mid-Atlantic Council to sustainably manage fisheries? And how will this allow the councils to mitigate social and economic impacts associated with the current rebuilding requirements? And finally, are there any other provisions needed to improve the rebuilding requirements? I have a second question, a second set too, but let's take this first.
And I appreciate the first question. I would suggest that what is in the draft relative to the elimination of as soon as possible and replacing that with as soon as practicable, and eliminating the 10-year requirement, and replacing that and leaving the maximum rebuilding time as F equals 0 plus 1 mean generation time. I think that, more than anything else, gives us the flexibility we need to fully consider a broader range of rebuilding alternatives. And if you think about the example of spiny dogfish that happened in the Mid-Atlantic, that was probably the most extreme case of rebuilding, where we started out with a plan that would rebuild it in 5 years. It has a mean generation time of 35 years. I think that highlights the difference in range of potential outcomes that we could have considered. And I'm not suggesting we would have gone to the maximum, but we could have considered a schedule that would have allowed us to attenuate those impacts that wasn't available to us at that time. And we could have allowed a sustainable but lower level of fishery to occur that would preserve the infrastructure. So I think, and in addition, I think there is some need at the end of a rebuilding period, if biological or environmental conditions aren't favorable for rebuilding. You know, if you have a period of low recruitment, or if growth changes and your projections aren't realized in a stock that you're trying to rebuild, I think you should have flexibility to amend the timeline. You still have to maintain a low rate of removals, but part of the problem is if you get to the point that you got 2 years left in a 10-year period and you're not there, you may have to impose very draconian cuts on the fishery, and we considered that in summer flounder, as you know, in the past.
Exactly. All right, let me ask you a second question. I'm interested in your proposal to give councils flexibility in the development of recreational accountability measures when there's poor scientific information, and I propose making management more contingent upon having adequate scientific information. Would you elaborate on how the council could develop ways of basing management on levels of scientific certainty, and what type of statutory authority you would need to achieve that?
Certainly. I think there are two areas where this is most significant. One is in the process of setting quotas. So just thinking back to the way that the assessments work and then putting that through the SSC, the draft does include a provision that would change the advice coming from the SSC or the ceiling that we would have in setting quotas. And I see some problems with that provision, but I think if that were repurposed around giving the council some discretion in setting quotas on data poor stocks, I think that would give us important flexibility, and that would be important for some of our recreational fisheries in the mid, like black sea bass. But with respect to the recreational accountability measures, I think they shouldn't be set up in a way that implies a level of precision and accuracy that does not exist. And that's where we are now. So if we had the ability to consider the confidence intervals, for example, about the catch estimates in developing accountability measures, I think that would allow us to temper our responses and make them more appropriate, because these are not census estimates. They're simply, on the East Coast, they're sample-based surveys, and it's not a complete enumeration of catch. So in those situations, we need to treat the data appropriately. I think accountability is still in order, but it needs to reflect the data better.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.